السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. We are talking about the Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in the Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we're talking about how different religions came into Arabia from different parts of the world. And we talked about who was the first person to bring shirk into Arabia. What was that person's name? See, mashallah, so beneficial. Amr ibn Luhay. Remember, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say about him? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I saw Amr ibn Luhay in Jahannam, in hellfire, pulling his intestines behind him. So they were all out of his body, and he was pulling it because awwala man baddala din al-Arab, the first person who changed the religion of the Arab. Because we know initially they were following the deen of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam after he built the Kaaba, and Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam started living in Makkah. So all the people of Arab were following the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And then, of course, Amr ibn Luhay, when he went to Syria, he saw the idols, and he brought the idol back with him that we covered. And then we were talking about how different Christians and Jews from different parts of the world, they started coming and living close to Yathrib. Yathrib was the town which is nowadays is known as Medina. Yathrib, they started living around Yathrib because they saw the signs in their books, in their scriptures about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last prophet, coming to a town with this characteristics. And they realized that that was the town of Yathrib. That's how the Christians and the Jews, they started coming and living around Yathrib. And they used to tell the Ansar that our Nabi is coming and we're going to follow him. And when we start following him, we're going to rule over you and take over all you people. That's how the Ansar knew that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was coming. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say, He gives hidayah to whomever He wishes. The Jews were waiting for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're the ones who told the Ansar about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Ansar accepted Islam, whereas the Jews did not. Anyways, then we talked about a king from Yemen. His name was Tubban As'ad, who sent his son to Yathrib to live in Yathrib so that he thought he might become the last prophet, or if at least if he did not become the last prophet, he can follow the last prophet. And someone killed him. Tubban came to attack Madinatul Munawwara, and then we talked about how he was the first one to cover the Kaaba. Then after he died, who took over? His son Hassan. And then Hassan wanted to rule the world, and then his army convinced his brother to kill him. His brother's name was Amr. And then we talked about then after Amr died, then there was a dispute in the people of Yemen about who's going to rule. And who came and took over? Lukhunay, a robber. He came and he took over Yemen and he ruled Yemen. And then there was a person who rose from the clan, from the family of Tubban, and he reclaimed the throne, and his name was Dhu Nawas. We were talking about that. Dhu Nawas came, and to protect, because he saw everything that was happening, to protect his kingdom, what did he do? He started using magicians around him. So he was controlling people through magic. And everyone knew that if you cross Dhu Nawaz, he's going to use magic on you and he's going to kill you. And we talked about the incident of the boy whom the king assigned to the biggest magician that he had, the main magician, who was teaching him all of the magic because he knew he was about to die. This also shows that even though he said that I'm the magician, I can do anything, and the king is keeping around him, he could not prevent his death. He could not prevent his death. And he knew he was getting old and he was going to die. So he started teaching the boy, and the boy, he started learning the deen on the other side, started learning magic on one side, and he had a chance to test that when that beast came. Some say it was a lion, and he threw the stone, a small pebble with the name of Allah, and he killed that animal. Everyone thought that it was through magic because he was learning magic for the king. And the boy told everyone that it was not because of magic, it was because of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as people started coming to him that cure me from this disease or take care of this need of mine, he started telling everyone that believe in Allah, I'll make dua to Allah. If Allah wishes, it will happen. And slowly some people started turning towards, of course at that time, the Islam, which was Christianity. And we talked about how when the king found out, he wanted to kill the boy. And first he sent him on top of the mountain, and he could not kill him. He sent him in the middle of the ocean. He could not kill him. And the boy told him, the only way to kill me is gather all the people of Yemen and take the arrow from me and say, Bismillahi Rabbil Ghulam, and shoot the arrow at me. And we talked about how the king gathered everybody, he shot the arrow, and it did not even strike the boy, it just scratched him. And the boy died because he said, Bismillahi Rabbil Ghulam, that I'm shooting this with the name of Allah, who is the Lord of this boy, this child. And what happened? He was trying to prevent one boy from the deen. And all the people that were gathered over there, what did they all say? Amanna bi Rabbil Ghulam. That we all believe in the Lord of this boy. Because they saw that the king, who thought he was so powerful, who thought he himself was God, he could not kill the boy. And the only way he could kill the boy was by the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they all accepted Islam. Now the king had a problem, that he was trying to get rid of one boy who did not believe in that he was God, and now he has the whole country to worry about. Of course, remember, when the arrogance is in a person, when he thinks he's big, he will do anything. So the king, he ordered his army, and they started digging trenches. And we're not talking about, trench that you dig a hole like this. No, it was big, huge trenches. And they started building fire in there, and they let the fire burn for days. And then he started throwing all the people who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into the fire. And this is, of course, proven from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Buruj, قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ النَّارِ ذَاتِ الْوَقُودِ إِذْ هُمْ عَلَيْهَا قُعُودٌ وَهُمْ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ شُهُودٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that these were believers. And the kuffar, the disbelievers, they were sitting around the trenches, and they were laughing at these people that they're being thrown into the fire. And of course, we know the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said at this time, there was a mother with a small baby in her hand. And she was hesitating, should I jump in? She wasn't afraid for herself because she believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But she was afraid for her baby, that what will happen to my baby? At that time the baby spoke. The newborn baby, the baby spoke, and the baby said, the mother jump in because there is Jannah inside that fire. So she jumped in. So this is how Dhu Nawas, he tried to control the people from turning away, supposedly from believing in him as God and believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But of course, when a person has that true iman, then a person is willing to die for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people were dying. It so happened that one of the people from there, he ran away. And he went to King Hercules, and he told him that this is what Dhu Nawas is doing. So King Hercules, he told Najashi. Najashi is the king of Ethiopia. We know when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave ijazah to some people to migrate. So Sayyidina Ja'far radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he migrated, who was the brother of Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he migrated to Ethiopia. So the king there is called Najashi. So King Hercules told Najashi that go and take care of this matter. Because remember, these were the people who believed in Allah and the deen of that time. So, because they had the same belief, so he said go and do Nawaz, because he's going against those people who are believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, go take care of him. So Najashi, he prepared a big army. It comes in the history that it was about 70,000 people. And when we talk about that's a large army, even for those days. So he prepared a army of 70,000 warriors, and he sent them to Yemen to take care of Dhu Nawas. And the commander-in-chief of that army was a person called Ariyat. He was a leader. He was a leader in the sense that he was the general of the army. He was commander-in-chief. So under the leadership of Ariyat, King Najashi, he sent 70,000 men to go and take care of Dhu Nawas. Of course, Ariyat came and he killed Dhu Nawas. He killed all those people who were still willing to follow him and who were part of his army. And Ariyat took over Yemen and he started ruling Yemen. Now when Ariyat started ruling Yemen, of course, he started doing what all the kings were doing at that time. That he started doing whatever he wanted, and especially killing people, whomever he wanted, and whoever would not listen to him, he would just kill him. And especially it was not like the people around him, because he was not even really a king. If you look at it, he was just a general. He was just the commander-in-chief of the army. And because there was nobody else over there to rule Yemen, he became in charge. And now he started acting like king and started killing people. So there was another commander in his army by the name of Abraha. So Abraha, he had a disagreement with Ariyat that why are you doing all of this? So they started fighting amongst each other. So there is the same army from who came from Ethiopia, sent by King Najashi, and they started fighting amongst each other. After some time, Abraha said to Ariyat that it doesn't make sense that we're fighting with each other. We're from the same place. And the people, basically we're killing each other. We're all from Ethiopia and we're just killing each other. So why don't we do this? The people of Yemen are there, they're there to be ruled. So why don't we have one-on-one combat, and whoever wins can rule Yemen. So the army will be his. So instead of fighting amongst ourselves with the army, it's better that we fight one-on-one and whoever wins can rule Yemen. So he agreed to that, and Ariyat and Abraha started fighting, and Ariyat hit Abraha on his nose, and he cut his nose. That's why Abraha, his nickname was Abrahatul Ashram. Ashram in Arabic, it means a person with a cut off nose. So that was his nickname because his nose was cut off. So he cut his nose, but Abraha was able to kill Ariyat. And he took over the rule of Yemen. Now when Abraha started ruling Yemen, when Najashi found out that he killed Ariyat, and Ariyat was assigned by the king Najashi. So Najashi sent for Abraha and he said, what are you doing? Why did you kill Ariyat? If he was doing something that you did not like, you should have complained to me and I would have taken care of it. And if he still did not listen, I would have sent my army to take. You should not have killed him. So he was really upset at him. But Abraha, he apologized. But of course, he was still not where he was before he got into trouble, you can say. So King Najashi was still upset at him. So Abraha wanted to do something special for King Najashi. He wanted to do something which would show that he was willing to do anything for King Najashi. So after thinking about it some time, and we know that Najashi, as we talked about, that he was a very religious person, you can say. Very, of course, because he believed in Christianity of that time, which was Islam. So he was a very religious person. He was inclined towards deen. So he said, I'm going to build a house of worship. We can call it masjid. So he said, I'm going to build a house of worship, and he will be happy with me that I built a house of worship. So he built a really big house of worship, and he called it Al-Qulays. And he told the people of Yemen that now you cannot go and do tawaf of the Kaaba, you cannot go to Makkah for Hajj, now you have to come and do tawaf of Al-Qulays. Now your Hajj is here, by Al-Qulays. So of course, people, Yemen, because he was ruling Yemen, they're still okay people. The Arab, they were really mad, they were really upset. That he's telling us that we leave the Kaaba here, built by our forefathers, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, and go and worship in Al-Qulays. So they say he can do whatever he wants, but we're not going to do it. There was a town near Makkah, it was called An-Nasi. An-Nasi Those of you who were there a few Jummahs ago, we were talking about An-Nasi. Who was there and who remembers what is An-Nasi? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah At-Tawbah, He mentions, إِنَّمَا النَّسِيءُ زِيَادَةٌ فِي الْكُفْرِ. The Nasi is increasing kufr. What is this talking about? No? You don't remember? Remember, Arabs, because supposedly they were following the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam to an extent. And even in the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, there were 4 months which were Ashhurul Hurum, which were considered to be sacred months, in which you could not fight, you could not kill anyone. And there were, which months? Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, 3 together, and then Rajab. So these were 3 months together and 1 month separate. 1 month separate, Rajab is fine, because if they don't fight for 1 month, it was okay. But we know for 3 months not fighting, that was their livelihood. That's how they earned money. They used to rob people, they used to kill people. But they said, no, we have to respect Nasi. We have to respect the Ashhurul Hurum, the sacred months which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deems sacred. This is, my teacher, he used to say that this is our mentality nowadays. We say, this is deen. We have to follow deen. Right? So what are they saying? Ashhurul Hurum is a sacred month, so we have to follow. So what should we do now? So they say, they assigned a committee. They were called Ahlun Nasi. They were the people who used to move the months around. So they used to look at the month. Some people would come and they would tell them that, listen, we're running out of money, we're running out of food. So next month we hear that there's a big caravan going through our town, so we're going to need to attack them. So say, it's okay, we'll take care of it. What will they do? They say, Dhul Qa'dah just finished, so they see the moon for Dhul Hijjah. The next month they see the new moon. So they will say, this moon is not for Dhul Hijjah. This is for Safar. This now the next month after Dhul Qa'dah is Safar. So since Safar you can fight because it's not from Ashhurul Hurum. So they used to go and they used to fight. And then when they used to see the next month, they say, oh, now Dhul Hijjah came. So they used to move the months around, so that they're not fighting in the days that were deemed sacred by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's what we do to deen now. We say that this is deen. We know that we're not supposed to have mixed gatherings in the masjid. So what are we going to do? We're not going to build a masjid, we're going to call it community center. Community center, everybody can be together. No, you cannot, in the masjid, you cannot have men and women together. But in community center, yeah, it's not in the masjid. We have to follow the deen, right? So this is, look at it. Where it's coming from? They're saying, they believe that this is the truth, this is the haqq. But does it make sense to us when we think about it? That we say that it's not the next month, it's actually a few months later? But we know that before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, when the Hajj was made fard, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not perform Hajj the first year he was made fard. He sent Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, then he sent Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu behind him the first year, and then the next year Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he himself performed Hajj, and the reason he gave was, he said the months that the Quraysh and the people of Nasi, Ahlul Nasi used to move around, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put those months back in its actual order, so from now on they're going to stay in its proper order. So this was Ahlul Nasi. Of course, this is part of history, right? So it's good to know. So when a person from Ahlul Nasi, he was really upset that Abraha, he built Al-Qulais. So he went to Yemen and he used the bathroom inside Al-Qulais. He didn't know what else to do. It's one person, so there's nothing what he could do. So he used the bathroom inside Al-Qulais and he took it and he rubbed it all over the walls. So somebody came and said, the masjid stinks. It stinks. So they went and they complained to Abraha that this is what someone did, that they used the bathroom and they messed up all the walls of the house that you built for worship. So Abraha, of course, he was already looking for a chance because the Arab, they refused to come to Al-Qulais to do their Hajj. So he was already upset at them. He said, okay, I'll show them now. So Abraha, he prepared his army and he left Yemen and he came to attack Kaaba. He said, now I'm going to destroy Kaaba. If there is no Kaaba, then everyone will have no choice but to come and do their Hajj in Al-Qulais. Abraha, he left on an elephant. That elephant was called Mahmud. His name was Mahmud. Mahmud here also. So that elephant's name was Mahmud. And why did he specifically use an elephant? He used that elephant so that he said it would be easier to break the Kaaba. He said, I can tie the Kaaba to that elephant and pull the elephant and the Kaaba will fall down. And he started coming towards Mecca. And of course, as he was coming, there were different tribes of Arab who tried to stop him on the way. But of course, they could not because of his power. And he was a very powerful person. And of course, with his army, nobody could defeat him. And he arrived in Makkatul Mukarramah at nighttime. When he arrived in Makkah, since it was nighttime and he could not do anything, there were some cattle grazing that belonged to the people of Makkah. So he took all that cattle, the sheep, all the goats, all the camels, all the cows that were outside of Makkah that were left there for grazing. He took all of them just to show his power that nobody can do anything to me. There were 200 camels in there that belonged to the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdul Muttalib. So Abdul Muttalib, he found out that Abraha took 200 of my camels. He came to talk to Abraha. And Abraha is sitting in his tent, the king. So he's sitting in his tent. Abdul Muttalib comes. When Abdul Muttalib enters his tent, he starts shaking. Abraha. Abdul Muttalib, it comes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him a lot of ru'b, lot of authority. Jise Urdu mein barob kehte hain. Okay, when a person looks at him, they start shaking. And Abraha, he was a very powerful person. But when he saw, of course, you can imagine the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Abdul Muttalib came and started shaking, he came down and sat on the floor. And he sat Abdul Muttalib down. And he said, what can I do for you? Abdul Muttalib said, that you took 200 of my camels, I just want my camels back. Now Abraha, he got upset. He said, I came here to destroy the Kaaba, and I'm going to attack the Kaaba, and you're coming here asking me about your camels? Look at the words. This is Abdul Muttalib. We're not talking about Iman. We're not talking about, following Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Look at the words he used. He said that Ana Rabbul Ibil. He said, I am the owner of these camels. Ana Rabbul Ibil. I'm the owner of these camels. Walil Bayti Rabbun Yuhmi. That this house also has an owner who will take care of it himself. I'm only worried about my camels because they're mine. I'm the owner. I'm not the owner of this house. This house belongs to Allah. Allah will take care of it. I'm not worried about that. Abraha gave Abdul Muttalib back his camels, and he told him, he said, tell the people of Makkah that in the morning they should all leave Makkah. No one, because I do not want to kill anybody, and that they should leave Makkah, and when I destroy the Kaaba, then they can come back into Makkah. And of course, because we know the people of Makkah, they were very simple people, so they did not want to fight, they left. And they knew that they could not fight against the army of Abraha. So they left Makkah. They went outside into the hills and they're watching from the mountains. Next morning, Abraha, he started coming towards Kaaba on his elephant called Mahmud. So when he started riding Mahmud, it would not go towards Kaaba. It would just sit down. It just sat down. Mahmud sat down. It just sat down. His whole army, they tried to move it. Of course, elephant, you cannot just move an elephant. And then when they would turn him away from the Kaaba, it would start going. But towards Kaaba, it would not go, it would just sit. It shows the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we think that this, we can control all of these things. That animal has no understanding. That we should be able to do whatever we want. Do we have an extra battery? AA. Can the sisters hear? Yes. Okay. So it shows how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls everything. We say, I'm driving the car. The car is in my control. And we realize when something happens that in 1 second, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have taken our life. Everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyways, when they could not do anything while they were trying to move the elephant, they saw a black cloud coming from far. There's a black, dark cloud coming from far. And it was coming really fast. Usually clouds, they move slowly, but this cloud was moving really, really fast. When it came closer, they realized that it was not a cloud, it was actually small birds. They were actually small birds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ أَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ كَيْدَهُمْ فِي تَضْلِيلٍ وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the tayr, which were called ababil. Very small. And they were holding 3 small pebbles in their, 1 in their beak and 2 in their claws. 3 pebbles each. Small cloud. Each of them came, 3 pebbles, they threw it down. None of them missed. We talk about nowadays, we talk about all these bullets, we talk about all this, technology. Look at this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using birds. And each bird has 3 stones, 3 pebbles. And each pebble is hitting 1 person from the army of Abraham. And it would go through that person. It would hit the person wherever it hit. If it hit on his arm, it would go through his arm. But what it did was, it gave kharij jise kehte hain, what itch. So they started itching, and every time they would scratch themselves, their meat started falling off. That was their punishment, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made their bodies into soft, you can say like cotton. And because of that, they had itch, and every time they would itch, all their meat and their muscles would fall off. What does that? فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصٍ مَأْكُولٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about them. He says, we left them like chewed up hay. An animal, a cow for example, eats hay and he spits it back. You see the hay, what it looks like? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we left them like that. All like chewed up hay, that their flesh is separated from their bones. This was the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that person, and of course those people who tried to attack the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This incident took place 50 to 55 days before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This shows that there was something going to happen. Because if you look at it, Kaaba was filled with idols. We know that even when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, even when he received prophethood, in and around Kaaba, there were a lot of idols. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He did not do it to protect those idols. He did it to show somebody that there is somebody, to show the people that there is somebody who's going to come and who's going to clean the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this incident took place about 50 to 55 days before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now we have reached the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But before we talk about the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just quickly about the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we talk about the nasab, the ancestors of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they're divided into 3 categories. One is from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to his great grandfather, of course, up the line, Adnan. And then from Adnan, it was Ma'ad bin Adnan, to Ismail bin Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And then from Ismail bin Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, the third chain is up to Shith bin Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. So these are the 3 separate ancestors that come of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that no one from Abdullah till Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, no one committed zina from my ancestors. This was how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected the ancestors of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that he was pure nasab. His nasab was very pure. And the nasab of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim bin Abdul Munaf bin Qusay bin Kilab bin Murrah bin Ka'ab bin Luway bin Ghalib bin Fahr bin Malik bin Nadhr bin Kanana bin Khuzaymah bin Mudrika bin Ilyas bin Mudhar bin Nazar bin Ma'ad bin Adnan. This is the one that is usually proven in all the books, that it says that this is normally they stop at Adnan, because up to there we know all the details of them. Of course, we're not going to go into the details of all of them, just couple of them, the important ones. Because we know that the tribe of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was called what? Quraysh. They were called Quraysh. So who was the first person to be called Quraysh? The 10th grandfather, or you can call it 10th great-grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Fahr bin Malik. Fahr bin Malik was the first person who was called Quraysh. And why was he called Quraysh? When he was the leader, there were some people who were trying to attack Kaaba. And Fahr, by himself, he defeated the whole army that tried to attack and destroy the Kaaba by himself. And in Arabic, Dhatul Qirsh is called, Dhatul Qirsh is what? A whale. A whale, we know. We hear about whales, the largest mammal. Whale is called Dhatul Qirsh. So he was called Quraysh. Quraysh in Arabic, those of you who know Arabic a little bit, is Ismut Tasghir. That means that a small whale. So because of his strength and because of his power, he was called Quraysh. And that was the name that went on, and that tribe and of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was called Quraysh. The 5th grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Qusay. We talked about Qusay. Who remembers? It was when we were talking about the people who built the Kaaba. How many times was the Kaaba built? See, today's the day. Today's the exam day. Quiz. 11 times. From the beginning, it was a total built 11 times. We talked about this in detail. The first time by the angels, before the Adam alayhi salatu wasalam was sent into this world. And then it was created by Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. Then his son, Sheeth alayhi salatu wasalam. Then after the flood of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, someone built the Kaaba again after that. Then it was created by Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam. Then it was by a tribe. It was called... what was the tribe called? One was by Jurhum, one was by Amalika, that was the tribe Amalika, one was by Jurhum, and then one was by Qusay bin Kilab, the 5th grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? Qusay bin Kilab was a person, his name was actually not Qusay, his name was Zayd. He was called Qusay because in Arabic, Aqsa, Qusay or Aqsa, it means to be far away. To be far away. And his mother had married someone who lived on the border of Syria. And she had moved to Syria, so that's why he was called Qusay. That a person who's far away. So his name was Qusay. And of course, later on, he came back to Makkatul Mukarramah. Qusay bin Kilab, he came back to Makkatul Mukarramah, and he wanted to get married, and he got married to the leader of Makkah at that time. To the daughter, who was the daughter of the leader of Makkah at that time. And as a gift to his daughter, he gave the responsibility of Kaaba to her. So he gave her in hadiyah, or as a gift, he gave her the house, the Kaabatullah, Baytullah. But he said that, when two people get married, they're so in love, she might give it to her husband. So he didn't want that. One day she comes to her father and she says, "Father, I gave it to my husband Qusay." So he wanted to protect that, so he stayed in his family. So he made a person responsible for that. That person was called Abu Ghabsan. Abu Ghabsan was responsible that she could not give this to anybody without the permission of Abu Ghabsan. So Abu Ghabsan could not do it himself. And she could not do it without telling Abu Ghabsan. So she would have to tell Abu Ghabsan. With her permission, Abu Ghabsan could transfer the services of Kaaba to whomever she wished. So 2 people were involved now. After the leader died, Qusay, the great-grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim bin Abdul Munaf bin Qusay. So the 5th grandfather, including his father. So he said, I have to get the Kaaba somehow. Because it was an honor to serve the Kaaba, to be known as the Jawar of Kaaba. Jawar meaning that the people responsible for the Kaaba. So he said, I have to get it from Abu Ghabsan. So he said, what can I do? Abu Ghabsan, he liked to drink a lot. He liked drinking alcohol.
They have a drink door there.
Of course. Drinking has been going from... So he liked to drink alcohol. So Qusay, he got him one day and he invited him. And he started giving him to drink. And we know a person who's addicted to drinking. Drinks. So he kept on drinking. So he said, he had 1 bottle left. So he said, Abu Ghabsan, you want this? So he said, yes, I want this. They say, okay, bring the papers of the Kaaba and hand it over to me. So Abu Ghabsan said, okay. He said, no, not so fast. We need to have witnesses. Otherwise tomorrow you're going to say I didn't do it. So they called witnesses, and in front of witnesses, Abu Ghabsan, they gave those papers and handed over the services of the Kaaba. To remember, even in those days, they realized that no one can own the Kaaba. It's just basically having the ability to be called Jawarul Kaaba, the people who are in charge of Kaaba. So he gave him the papers because they needed his signature and his wife wouldn't mind. So it was just Abu Ghabsan that he had to convince. So basically he got him drunk and he said, okay, in front of all of these witnesses, sign this. So they were all witnesses. And then the next day Abu Ghabsan realized what happened, what he did. Everybody came to him and said, you gave the Kaaba, you left your clan now it's in the hands of Quraysh. Now they're in charge of the Kaaba now. He said, no. They said there were so many people, he could not deny it. But his clan and Qusay and Quraysh, basically they're together. They had a fight, but Quraysh won. And Quraysh took over Kaaba and they became in charge of Kaaba. And we knew that all the way till Abdul Muttalib, it was in the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they were Jawarul Kaaba, they were the people in charge of the Kaaba. This was Qusay. Now, Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib, that was Abdul Muttalib, of course, slave of Muttalib. If you look at the name, Abd means slave and Muttalib is a name. So Abdul Muttalib, slave of Muttalib. Of course, this is not his real name. His real name was Amir and he was known as Shayba. Amir, when his father, who was the father of Abdul Muttalib? Hashim, right? Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim. So when Hashim died, Abdul Muttalib or Amir, you can say, or Shayba, he was in Yathrib at that time. When Hashim passed away, his brother went to get Abdul Muttalib or Amir from Yathrib. And when he was bringing him back, his brother's name was Muttalib. When he was bringing him back into Makkah, he was in the front, Muttalib, and Amir was sitting in the back, behind Muttalib. So normally in those days, the way they traveled was when they had a slave to sell, they would make him sit in the back and they would come and they will sell it to whoever wants to buy it. So when he entered Makkah, people looked at this young man and they said, look, Muttalib brought a slave. So they started calling him Abdul Muttalib, the slave of Muttalib. So that's how his name became Abdul Muttalib, and that is what he was known, but his actual name was Amir, and like I said, his laqab was Shayba, and he was known as Shayba, and his real name was Amir. So this is basically up to the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Abdul Muttalib, he had 20 or 23 children. There are different narrations, whether it was 20 or whether it was 23. Everybody, all the historians, they agree that he had 6 daughters. So there is no ikhtilaf in that. Everybody agrees that there were 6 daughters, but there is ikhtilaf of how many children or how many boys did he have. Some say he had 14, some say he had 17. Whoever says they had 14, they say he had 20 kids. And whoever says that he had 17 boys plus 6 girls, they say he had 23 kids. So there is ikhtilaf in that. And we know that one of those boys was the father of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam named Abdullah. Inshallah, we'll talk about this. There were some signs we talked about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and He showed to people that there was something big that was going to happen, like this big incident which took place with Abraha, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected his house. This was only 50 to 55 days before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There were some other things which happened before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, we'll try to cover those in our next session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to learn from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and be able to apply it into our lives. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
If anybody has any questions, inshallah, we can take the questions.
If there are no questions, inshallah, let's quickly make